Thank you, Bruce. Yes, there's an effort afoot to, I mean, there are problems with the legislation, the statutes. That takes the legislature to change. That isn't going to happen this time. They're already almost out of session. That must be changed. But even prior to that, what must be changed are the regulations that regulate these projects, particularly the noise regulations, which are wholly inadequate, from which people are suffering health impacts, including insomnia and so on in their communities. We, the Citizens Task Force, which Joanne is on, which I am on, and which there are people out here, members of, are working to get the Department of Environmental Protection to create an appropriate regulations to control the very unique noise that causes these problems.
I just want to, the sense that there's a governmental conspiracy to push legislation is exaggerated.
Yes.
The governor felt that it was imperative to begin the process of laying out the foundation for the financial, technical, and regulatory foundation to begin the process of drawing interest to Maine as a location for the natural resource and turbine industry. The committee process is working well. LD 1810 just had its 6-hour public hearing last Thursday. I talked to members of the committee. They are scrutinizing. They are going over line by line. They are not happy with many parts of it. It is not a done deal. And the fear that things are being rushed through and that suddenly there's going to be the whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of windmills around every house, it's just not going to happen. And I think we have to just realize that there is a legislative process and there are public hearings, and you, any of you, can go up there and speak to them, and legislators do listen.
A little background on the wind law that was passed in 2007. It arose from the denial by the Land Use Regulation Commission of the Reddington Mountain proposal, and there was a lot of discussion and feeling in the state that we needed to examine the whole question of how wind was permitted. The governor appointed a task force. There were 17 members, a grand total of 2 of whom had anything to do with the wind industry. All the rest were legislators, citizens. There was a representative, as I recall, from the Appalachian Mountain Club, the Natural Resources Council of Maine, Maine Audubon, and they spent a year and a half. They had 12 public hearings around the state. They came up with a set of recommendations, submitted them to the legislature. The legislature, I'm quite sure, had at least one public hearing. I've never heard of the legislature not passing something with no public hearing, and ended up passing the bill unanimously. I can tell you the only thing expedited about it is the title. Today marks the 3rd year that we've been working on our Roxbury project, and the application was submitted back in late 2008. Yeah, that's right. Late 2008, considered by the Department of Environmental Protection for 8 months, then through an appeals process which wound up just today before the Board of Environmental Protection. So the idea that somehow these things are sneaking through without any public scrutiny. In our Roxbury project, we had 27 public meetings in the town of Roxbury involving the planning board, the selectmen, and I'm delighted that tonight, there's history made tonight because Lynn endorsed our Roxbury project when she said, if a community wants a project, then that's up to the community. Our project in Roxbury was voted affirmatively by a town meeting. It was voted by not one but 2 town meetings by the citizens of Roxbury, not by the selectmen, not by a town council, but by the citizens of Roxbury in a town meeting. They approved the project specifically. They approved the legislative changes necessary to allow it. And so these things go through an enormous amount of scrutiny and require an enormous amount of scientific data to be submitted to the regulatory agency.
If you'd hand that mic to Lynn there, she wants to say something.
Briefly, you left off the second half of my caveat about communities. If the community wants it and the community benefits from it.
She should have held on. Here's the community benefit in Roxbury. Number one, we're going to pay about 60% of local property taxes. People's local property taxes are going to drop by 2/3. Secondly, we're providing free electricity to every resident of Roxbury, summer or winter. They still have to pay the CMP delivery charge, but again, their electric bills will fall by about 2/3. Now, if that's not a community benefit, a direct community benefit, I don't know what is.
Let's take
That was a bribe.
question from this gentleman over here.
Thank you. I don't often get called a gentleman. Thank you. My question is for Jonathan on the end. I appreciate your passion to preserve the aesthetics in your region. You mentioned a drop in tourism, and I was wondering if you could reference any specific cases at one case where that was happened, or if you've done any sort of studies of a potential drop in tourism. My second part is you also mentioned potential impacts on breeding patterns of wildlife, and if you could refer me to any studies or I could read up on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, the issue of wildlife, there's some recent studies that have come out, and I don't have the reference right off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to send those to you. There's some very good references that show that in areas where animals live with a background level of let's say 25 decibels, and you put these wind turbines in and it's up to 45 decibels, that it severely impacts their breeding behavior, their feeding behavior, the whole predator-prey relationship. Because they can't hear their predators, they are more apt to spend more time looking for their predators, and it goes down to energetics. As far as tourism is concerned, that is somewhat of a subjective analysis on my part, that having lived up in the Highland Mountains and know that people come up through there to hunt and fish, they go to the Bigelow Preserve and hike, it just seems rather self-evident that people are not going to want to go up to and view a massive industrial power plant on the tops of the mountains as they're trying to commune with nature.
Has that happened anywhere else?
I don't have a good study to give you on that.
Okay,
Maybe
a
somebody
question.
out there does. Do you have a study?
Would you stand up?
I was born in Belgium, and there are studies in Belgium that show that the tourism has been affected by turbines, as well as Scotland. So we can try to provide it for you. Just give your name and we'll give it to you. Okay?
You know, the other thing was when they started building all these things in Europe, they built all these visitor centers because they thought it was going to be increased tourism and that people were going to come because they wanted to look at these massive industrial wind farms, plants, and actually they're closing them down now because nobody's coming to them.
Question, tonight's focus, we talked about there's many possible solutions, solar, offshore wind, onshore wind. It's going to take a lot of different things in the basket. We seem to be focusing on the mountaintop wind turbines, and now there's more emphasis on the offshore wind turbines. But noticing in the paper here, there's no proposed offshore wind turbines yet. And now the coastal residents are getting wind of this, and they're starting to get concerned with their future. So then we want to go deeper offshore. When you go deeper offshore, you get into the right whale migration paths and endangered species acts. But my question to the panel is, do you see us here in 5 years having the same discussion on the option of migrating to, say, oh, we can't do offshore wind now either? So my question would be, what are we got to do? Is this got to be a continuing process that nothing is acceptable?
I think if we wait long enough, we'll see that we should have done something now.
Let's go to Peter Kent.
What we don't see right now, we are impacting cultures, we are having wars, we are changing communities